How about now?
Yes, it's recording
Yeah,
now.
I see
Amazing. Okay, awesome. Great. Thank you both. See, I get on a roll and then I forget something.
it.
Okay, so hopefully you can all see my PowerPoint.
Yes.
Yes? Okay, great. Awesome. All right, so we were founded in 1824. We are the oldest technological university in the United States. In addition, we are the first school to conduct lab-based learning and provide a degree in engineering. So like we were talking about before, we are located outside of Albany, New York, in a small city called Troy. We're located about 3 hours from Boston, New York City, and Montreal. So very central to a lot of major cities. And so for travelers, we have access to Amtrak, an international airport, and of course, rideshare services such as Uber and Lyft. Nationally, we are ranked 49th according to US News and World Report. Our enrollment is about 8,000 total. We have about 12 or 1,300 undergraduate students, the rest of which graduate students, the rest make up our undergraduate population. With our undergraduate and our graduate students combined, we represent all 50 states in the United States and a total of 58 countries. So it's a really diverse and great student body coming from all over the world, as you saw just from in our chat right now. We are considered a medium-sized research institution, and we offer over 40 master's and PhD programs. So our president, Dr. Shirley Ann Jackson, has been a trailblazer throughout her career. She was the first African-American woman to receive a PhD from MIT, and she's the first African-American woman to lead a top-ranked research institution. A theoretical physicist by practice, Dr. Jackson coined the term to describe the type of education our students receive. We are educating leaders in tackling complex global challenges and focus on solving complex global problems. So as we move into the 21st century and towards our bicentennial year, you will hear our leaders on campus talk about what it means to be a polytechnic. Dr. Jackson has coined the phrase, the new polytechnic, which strives to be a leader and innovator in key areas of education, with a focus on interdisciplinary research and collaboration. So here you'll see we have 5 different schools: our School of Architecture, our School of Humanities, Arts, and Social Sciences, which we call Haas, our School of Science, our School of Engineering, and our Lally School of Management. While we offer 5 different schools, Rensselaer's academic model is based on an interdisciplinary framework, allowing students to learn and immerse themselves in more than one school. Many of our research efforts involve not only multiple academic departments, but more than one school. And you'll see from our signature research thrusts the examples of how our academic programs avoid a silo model and are constantly interacting. So then within our graduate school, we offer 4 different types of degrees. We offer a Master's of Science, a Master's of Engineering, a PhD, so a Doctor in Philosophy, and then an MBA, which I don't think anybody here will be doing an MBA. Primarily, we're working here with students looking for a PhD, a Master's in Science, or a Master's in Engineering. So with that, I will stop sharing my screen. And we are going to shift over and let Lauren and Waleed kind of take the floor. So go ahead, Lauren and Waleed. What I think we'll do just from a logistical standpoint, after you both are done sharing your parts, I'll kind of manage and watch the chat box and either prompt students and direct students to turn on their cameras and speak if they so choose. Or read the questions from the chat box. Does that work for everyone?
Yep.
That works.
All right, you two, take it away.
So we'll start with our trivia champion, Lauren.
Thank you, Waleed. So hi everybody, my name is Lauren Brady. I am currently a PhD student working in creating biofabricated nanomaterials for biochemical sensing applications. I have been an undergraduate student, a master's student, and a PhD student at RPI, so I've had experience in both types of programs that you may be interested in. Currently, I'm a member of the Graduate Student Council, as is Waleed. And on the Graduate Student Council, we work to advocate for student interest and work with our department directly to ensure the best experience we can for graduate students.
Oh, my turn now?
Well, I figure you introduced yourself, right, Waleed?
Yeah. Hi, my name is Waleed Mansha. I'm also a PhD student at RPI. I joined the institute in 2016 in the PhD program, and during that time, I've gotten a master's degree in 2019. I did my undergrad from Pakistan and University of Engineering and Technology, and applied for graduate programs in different universities. RPI was one of the first places I got an admission offer from, and subsequently I reached out to one of the professors whose work I was interested in. That started a conversation between me and my professor, and as a course of that, I was convinced that this is the place that I want to be. And subsequently, I received other offers from other institutes as well, but I had made up my mind that I'm going to join RPI, and I joined RPI, and it's a decision that I do not regret to this point. So I'm part of the Graduate Student Council as well, as Lauren pointed out, and I'm currently in my 5th year, hoping to complete my PhD soon. So, my research area is in high frequency integrated circuits. So those of you who are not familiar, if you ever broken any electronics, any phones, if you see those black squares or rectangles, that's the kind of stuff that I design. And I'm open to your questions. Lauren, do you want to describe the life at RPI or in Troy in general?
Sure. So, as Mary Kate said, Troy is a relatively small city, but there is a lot to do in the area. We have a lot of restaurants downtown that are very popular. We also have a farmer's market that's held every Saturday that you may have heard us talk about. If you join the call early, that's very popular with graduate students and has a lot to offer. There are a lot of lakes and mountains around for hiking and other outdoor activities. And we're also close to some major cities that are definitely doable within a day trip. Waleed any
Yeah.
favorites of yours in
Yeah, so
particular?
that's one of the things that I like about this location, that it's not a busy metropolitan, that it's really crowded and it's overwhelming. At the same time, it's not the middle of nowhere. So a major city is just 10 to 15 minutes away. And as Lauren pointed out, it's a very scenic location. If you get just 15 minutes out of Troy, you'd see mountain ranges, you'd see lakes. There are a lot of hiking opportunities. Come winter time, you can go for skiing, rock climbing, ice skating. Uh, so there's definitely a lot to keep you occupied. And of course, if you join, there will be your graduate studies, which would be keep you occupied as well. As well as on campus, I believe there are about more than 150 clubs and organizations that are student run. So basically, any activity that you can think of, there's a club that does that. Maybe it could even be a board game, and literally there is a club that's dedicated to that board game. I've even heard there is a club which there's like blue M&Ms or something. They get together and they eat blue M&Ms. So there's a lot of stuff to do. Of course, now we're in the middle of a pandemic, so many of the in-person activities are no longer there. But hopefully, we'll be out of this soon and we could get back to doing all the fun activities on campus.
And I'm sure many of you may be considering how the pandemic would impact the start of your graduate career. Currently, the majority of students are allowed back on campus. There are certain cohorts, such as the sophomores, that aren't back this semester. In terms of graduate studies, students that have on-campus research have been allowed back in certain phases. We're working on shift work. So while the labs were closed for a few months, now we're back and still able to make some progress. Most courses seem to be remote. There are some that are hybrid or in person, and we've adapted that coursework to have online videos and other supplementary discussion forums to help try to improve the communication while everybody's remote. So we've made a lot of adaptations, and we also have very frequent testing on campus, and I've been on campus as Waleed has, and while it's a lot quieter, I found I'm still able to make progress on my work.
Yeah,
All right, so
a
we
lot of
have,
the I'm sorry, a lot of the
go ahead,
infrastructure
Waleed, keep
for
going. Once
uh,
you're done, we've got a question. So
sure.
finish and then we'll answer this question.
Sure. So a lot of the infrastructure for remote learning was already in place, and we did used to use that even when we didn't have to work remotely. Uh,
Mhm.
but as we've had to work remotely, so it was not that big of a difference going to remote work. Of course, some of the students like Lauren and me, we have to do experimental work, in which case we have to sometimes go back to our labs. So we can do that now. But for my case, for example, the design work, there was already this infrastructure in place in which I could remotely access all the design tools, all the research servers. So it's not that big of a difference working remotely right now.
Okay, so we have one question here. How is the lab life in RPI?
Lauren, first you.
All right. So the lab life is, I think that depends a lot on what your research interests are. Both Waleed and I are experimentalists, so we have a lot of experience in terms of lab work. We have a lot of great facilities on campus. So we have a biotech center where there are a lot of interesting and innovative resources that you can use. I currently, in my research, work very frequently in our clean room that we have. So a lot of device fabrication work, you can actually learn how to implement the tools that you would use in industry yourself. We have a lot of interdisciplinary lab work. So I have labs that I work in that are also part of the materials department, or I'm working with biologists. So I think the lab work there, depending on your research group, is very hands-on. I am fabricating and designing and actually able to produce a product, not just learn about it. So I've enjoyed my hands-on experience very much. And it's helped me also, even within my coursework, to be able to learn about it and then actually implement it in a way that's beneficial to my research.
To add to Lauren's points, again, I think when you're talking about lab life, it depends upon the particular environment of the research group you're talking about. So some of the research groups do computational work in which their lab would, in essence, be just a hall with their office spaces. Each graduate student, at least in our department that I know, everybody gets an office space in which you can sit down. You can work from that. And the research groups who have experimental work, they have dedicated labs in which they have all the hardware that they need to do the equipment. Uh, in addition to dedicated facilities that are monitored by each research group itself, we have other facilities that are managed by research centers at RPI or the institute as a whole. And as Lauren pointed out, one of my favorite things about on campus is the micro nanofabrication clean room. So we have a
Yes.
class 100 clean room. It's something that's not present at many research universities. And the good thing about this is that even as an undergraduate, if you want to do that, if you take the prerequisite course, you would actually get hands-on experience in the clean room, even if your research is not directly related to that. And if your research is directly related to it, you can take training to operate any of the equipment there, and then you can operate those equipment. So it's really fascinating stuff. Whenever I go into the clean room, it's like a kid in a candy shop. Uh, but there's just such fascinating stuff there. Photolithography, we have scanning electron microscopes, we have focused ion beam scopes. You can literally, there's equipment in the clean room in which you could do atomic layer deposition. So if you have a film, you can deposit one layer of an atom on top of it. So it's really fascinating stuff that you can use and actually get experience on at RPI.
And the scope of our clean room is actually well developed enough that we can contract out to companies that are interested in using it. So there are outside industrial companies that will use our clean room. So it really is a fully developed experience, and the clean room staff can also help address any needs. So I think it makes you a better engineer when you can have better informed design decisions because you've had experience not only in the theory but in development of a device, for instance. I know you probably all have different research interests, but when you can go from theory to device development to device characterization, for instance, you get a more holistic approach so you can make better design decisions for your research.
Awesome. We've got a thanks for that. Great question. Okay, next from Jessen. How about acceptance rates? So I might touch on this one just because
Yeah.
it's an admissions related question. So basically, so we don't have formal acceptance rates. Um, the acceptance rate and admission is based on programs. Programs determine how many students they're able to admit based on the year, um, the amount of funding and the need of students. So that varies per department and per program. So I apologize that it's a vague question, but I think that if you have a specific program in mind, please feel free to follow up with me afterwards, and we can talk a little bit more about that. Okay, may I ask that if I wanted to enter the undergraduate program, where can I find these resources to be a transfer student? Awesome. That's a great question. So, if you have completed a bachelor's degree and you would apply to a graduate program. If you have not completed a bachelor's degree yet and you're looking to transfer into Rensselaer to complete that, I'll put the email address right in the chat box, and that will give you. You can contact our undergraduate office, and they can give you more direction. Okay, next question. I read on your website that there is financial aid opportunities based on merit through TA and RA. However, it mentions that master's students should expect to fund their master's. How many master's students would you say get some sort of financial aid? Great question. A lot of people ask about funding. A lot of the master's students, and honestly, the majority are self-funded. If a master's student is offered financial aid or financial support, most of the time that's an external source that they're gaining funding for. Our Lally School of Management does offer some sort of funding opportunities for students, but they're sort of in their own area in terms of admission. So for the most part, PhD students are fully funded, which includes a TA or RA or graduate assistant position along with their classes. So Lauren and Waleed, I don't know if you want to maybe share a little bit about your experience and what you do either as a TA or an RA. I'm not sure what either of you do. So if you want, while we're waiting for another question or two, do you want to share a little bit about that?
Sure, sure. Lauren, you want to go ahead?
Sure. So I actually came in as a master's student, so I didn't come in directly as a PhD student. As a master's student, I had a year of TA funding, and then I also did end up with my second year with research funding. I will say that I had made a strong connection with my advisor, and so through demonstrating my work ethic and working with her while being on TA, I was able to get RA funding. Like Mary Kate said, everybody's experience is different, but it is possible. I think making a good connection with your advisor in your research interest area could be a benefit to you if you want to pursue funding there. Waleed?
Yeah. So I joined the doctorate program and I was offered a teaching assistantship at the beginning. And I did my 2 years, 2.5 years of teaching assistantship, and then I transitioned to a research assistant position. So in my experience, most of the graduate students that I've interacted with, they usually join with a teaching assistantship, and then the second semester or third semester, based on how their research work is going, they transition to a research assistantship. There are examples of students who directly come on a research assistantship, and I've seen also students who have their own external fellowships that they join on. So to touch a little bit on what could be your requirements when you are a teaching assistant. So both the teaching assistant and the research positions are part-time positions. You would be required to do 20 hours of work on that. As a teaching assistant, you might have to be a teaching assistant for one course for 20 hours, or it could be divided into a number of courses. For example, two courses, 10 hours, or it could be two courses, one 15 hours and one 5 hours. So that work is divided into different further subclasses. For example, if it's a lab course, you might have to spend 3 hours twice a week in a lab session, and then 4 hours could be grading for lab reports. If it's a theory course, it could be something like 2 hours, 3 days a week doing office hours, and then 4 hours for grading or something like that. That's the typically decided between you and the professor who you work along with the TA. For a research assistantship, there could be two cases. I've seen students who are funded through industrial collaborations on projects that are not directly related to their dissertation work, as in the work that's going to go towards their PhD. So in that case, they spend those 20 hours working on an industrial project, and then they have to do their research apart from that towards making progress towards their PhD. However, most of the time, what happens is when you are a research assistant, your funding somehow correlates to the research work that you're going to do that's actually going to go towards your dissertation. So the time you spent as an RA actually goes towards making progress towards your dissertation and ultimately your degree. So I hope that clarifies some of the stuff.
Awesome. Great. And we did have a question that I want to share with everyone. I did put it in the chat. In terms of the GRE for the fall 2021, we are still requiring that for PhD students. When you apply, whether it's for the fall of 2021 or at any semester, for the application review process, you can submit your unofficial scores. So you can self-report those on the application. If you are admitted at that time, you will be asked to request the scores from the testing institution. So sometimes students don't always know that. And I think it's a nice little piece when they're applying that you can just self-submit those. Do you know what the average for accepted ECEC PhD? Yes. So as I was saying before, that's a great question. Waleed and Lauren, maybe you can share about how many students are in your cohort. So out of, your, and remind me, I'm not sure if you're in the same cohort, but how many are in your class, I would say?
Do you know the answer to that, Waleed?
So I know that pre-COVID, we were expecting this year to get around 35, 40 graduate students in the ECSE department. That includes both core terms, masters, and PhDs. Now, of course, some of the students are not able to join. In general, I believe we have about 25 odd research groups on campus and on for the ECSE department. And in general, each group probably accepts one student per year. So for that's just a generalization on average. It could be that the one group is not accepting a student 1 year and another group might accept 3 students in a year. On average, this is the number. So you can expect in terms of PhD positions somewhere between 15 to 30, and then masters are typically more than the PhD applicants.
And a lot of groups really only try to bring on students when they know they'll have funding for them at some point. Advisors really try to be diligent about the fact that you're not going to bring a student on and then have them be on TA funding for years because the money isn't coming in. And I will say there are definitely variations in group size. In my group, there's only 2 graduate students. We're definitely on the small side. There are some groups that are as large as 10. So that really depends on your area of interest in the advisor. But you will be required to find an advisor your first semester of graduate study. So that's something to keep in mind. The ECSE website has a list of all of our professors that also gives insight into their research areas, courses they may teach, which give you some specifics on their areas of interest. So that way, ahead of time, you can start to decide which professors may align with your interests and get to know them.
Yeah, and through our outreach as a graduate council, we know that some of the recent funding opportunities from ECSE graduate faculty was uploaded on our website. So, but that's not an exhaustive list. Certainly, not every faculty diligently updates their status of whether they require students or not. But certainly, that could give you an idea of which faculty are actively looking for students and in which research areas.
Excellent. Okay, we have a question about the GRE scores. Do you know if admissions focus more on GRE scores or undergrad transcripts or other aspects? So I'll answer this, I guess, from an admissions point, and then Lauren and Waleed, please feel free to jump in. We find and we see that our departments look at the holistic application. So GREs are certainly important, but also your research experience, your prior coursework, so your transcript, your recommendations, and your personal statement, all factors weigh in. The biggest thing that I see and I think that puts students at an advantage is their research experience, because so much of your academic experience at RPI as a PhD student will be research. The ability to transition into a graduate program and succeed and support the professor in their research endeavors is really important. So that's the admissions side. Waleed and Lauren, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I would
So
agree. Oh, go ahead, Waleed.
go ahead. All right. Okay. So for in terms of admissions, I know the department gets, once the preliminary admission offers are sent out to the students, the ECSE department, they get a list of those students to which the applications are sent out to. And then the professors, they do take a look at the students, especially their research profiles, which matches with their requirements for research opportunities. And I think that is also a time in which the students who have gotten preliminary research offers, they reach out to professors. And that's usually a time where professional relationships are developed, and students start talking about different prospective faculty in which they could work around with. As Lauren pointed out, you are expected to select a research advisor during your first semester. However, if you apply to RPA, you get admission and you come here, don't get overwhelmed if you are not able to select that right away. Uh, RPI, we are a close-knit community, and in my experience, all the administration and the people that you work with, they actively go beyond their line of what's they're expected from them to help you out. And routinely, if you are in trouble and you're not able to meet a requirement, for example, that is the selection of a faculty within the first semester, you can reach out to your graduate program director, and they would look at your circumstances and extend that deadline for you. So the administration, especially in the ECSE department, it's not something that's working against you. It's something working with you to make sure that you're able to cross the line of your degree that you're going forward.
I would say that I don't think a standardized test has the full ability to be comprehensive about your ability as a researcher by any means. As a researcher, the majority of the time you're faced with answering a question that there's not an answer for yet, and you have to develop that and learn how to navigate that kind of space. So while the GRE, of course, is important, I think letters of recommendation, personal statement, your experience is what makes you stand out. I had a professor in our department that is not involved in my research area mention a year after my graduate application that he still remembered my personal statement, and that it really helped to kind of solidify why I could demonstrate that I would be a good graduate researcher. So I think it's important to make sure you're focusing on all aspects and don't get caught up in just a single number.
So one thing that I find that I have a lot of questions asked about is the dissertation process and how you select, and or whether it's you that selects it, the department selects, the board and the people that will sort of be evaluating that. So I'd love to hear and for you to share a little bit more about what that looks like.
Lauren, have you formed your doctoral committee?
No, not yet.
Okay,
Have
so
you, Waleed?
yeah, I have. Okay,
All
so I
right,
can
so you can tell us.
Okay, so as a part of your doctoral committee, there has to be at least 4 members in the doctoral committee. From that, the requirement is that at least 2 faculty members other than your advisor have to be from the department, and at least one of them has to be from someone outside the department. And that could be someone from the industry or another professor in another area of study. So in minimum, you need to have 4 faculty members. Typically, for my case, you would sit down with your advisor, and you would, when you're making your doctoral committee, you would have a clear idea of what your dissertation is going to be, what your research contribution is going to be. So you would identify the faculty members in the department who are most closest to your area of research, because they would be better able to judge you in your research. And also, it is the job of the doctoral committee to guide you and to mentor you towards your dissertation. So you would choose those faculty. And similarly, as Mary pointed out, most of the research work that we do at RPI, it's interdisciplinary. So you would have someone in another department who is related to your area of research as well. So you would pick them, you would reach out to those faculty members, and most probably you would already have a relationship with them, because if they are researching in a relevant area, you would probably have taken their courses, or you probably would have had a meeting with them in which you've discussed problems or potential collaborations. So you would reach out to them, you would introduce yourself, and you would request that they be on your doctoral committee, and typically they would accept that, and they would sign a form for that. Once you have all the signatures for the faculty members, you can submit that to your department, and the Office of Graduate Education processes that. Once your doctoral committee is formed, you get a formal letter from the Office of Graduate Education which tells you, okay, your graduate, this is your doctoral committee, and you have this much time to complete your dissertation process.
So there are three major steps in the timeline for our department. The first one, which would be most relevant to you, would be the RQE, which is our research qualifying exam. Every graduate student in a PhD program has to do the research qualifying exams. And so that's required if you come in with a master's degree in your second semester, and if you come in with a bachelor's degree in your third semester. So you have two chances to pass those, and you'll be there's details that we can give you after if you're interested on how that process works. But that's the first requirement. And then, as Waleed has mentioned, you need to form your doctoral committee, which you'll do as you prepare for your candidacy. The purpose of candidacy is to just ensure that you're making progress towards a dissertation, that you have a research topic or area that you can make novel advancements on, and then the final phase is your dissertation. And you're required to have 1 year between candidacy and dissertation. So that gives you a rough timeline of when you'll hit those phases.
What Lauren kindly did not point out, typically you call it the much dreaded qualifying exams.
Even I know they're dreaded.
I didn't say it was a good experience, to be fair. But also, our format in the department has changed. So the exam that Waleed and I took for our qualifying exam is structured very differently to the research qualifying exam, which is actually new this fall. And one cool thing I'll say is that when the department was formulating the research qualifying exam protocols and defining kind of the setup for that, they actually consulted with the Graduate Student Council to get the student perspective on it. So we were able to give our feedback on what the qualifying exam structure looked like.
Yeah, we I think we worked really closely with our graduate program director in doing that, and hopefully our objective was to make the exam more fair and dare I say a little easy for the students. uh, so our first cohort is going to be taking this new format of the exam this year, but the preliminary comments that we are receiving from at least the students who took the previous exam is that this new version is going to be easier. Uh, but I'm pretty sure that once the new version goes through, people are going to say the old version was better. But
We'll see. Time will tell. All right. So we have another question here from Ahmad. For PhD admissions directly after an undergraduate degree, whether the PhD advisors and the admission committee will consider the fact that students are unable to do research related work due to the closure of campuses and no access to labs because of COVID-19. Yes, that's a great question. My recommendation would be for you to explain that in your personal statement. So the personal statement is a great opportunity for you to share with the department a little bit about things such as this. So why and what your limitations are due to COVID, and other things of that nature. I think it's important to maybe highlight in that, even though you didn't do research, what are some research areas specifically that professors do on campus that would interest you and that you'd like to do. But yeah, I think that there's a little bit of grace and understanding that this is an unprecedented time in our lives.
And I think your research, your letters of recommendation would probably reflect that as well. If you had your faculty in your undergrad institute who were supposed to supervise your undergrad research or your senior projects, they would probably reflect that in in your letter of recommendation that you were supposed to do this, this, and this, but because of that, you were not able to make progress. And they can comment on your potential of doing research because they have seen you over a number of years and not just in this relatively short duration of COVID.
Mhm. And Walid, I think that point is really, really good and really important. And I think for Ahmad, when you talk to your recommenders, it's important to talk to them about that and explain that that's an important factor in the evaluation process, and ask them to include that in your letter. It's okay to ask that. It's appropriate, and we find it's valuable to make sure that they're highlighting those things.
And as an alternative at the moment, obviously due to the current climate that we're in, if there's a specific research interest area you're interested in, and there are undergraduate courses that are tailored at your institution to that research area, if you can take those, that will at least show that you're doing the best you can to get some engagement in that area, even with the lack of access to labs.
Yeah,
Yes.
there's another thing you could do is just read the state of the art in the area that you're interested in, and you could include your opinion on what the state of the art is and how that could be extended in your statement. And the faculty members who would be reading that would know that the fact that you know these things about the state of the art, that you are familiar with the research, and you are familiar with the issues that are being encountered in the area that you're interested in. So there is stuff that you can do, and you can address the constraints of COVID in your application process.
So we don't have any questions on the doc here, but what I think would be interesting while we wait for another question, it's 3:45, so I say we have time for maybe one more question from the group. But while we're waiting, I would love for you to talk about some of the projects that you're working on as members of the Graduate Student Council. So we talked a little bit about admissions, we talked a little bit about research, but if you maybe want to give us a little bit more detail about what you're doing in those roles to support the graduate student body.
Absolutely. So the Graduate Student Council is only about a year and a half
2
old or
years.
so.
2 years.
Oh, is it 2 years now? Time flies.
That should be a trivia question. Put it as a trivia question.
I win.
There you go. See, I would have lost.
Actually, you know what? She might be right.
But
I have to check my email.
we're relatively young as far as departmental graduate student councils go. We'll say that. We've engaged in a variety of different types of projects. So on campus, we have a lounge called the Flip Flop Lounge, and a lot of undergraduate students use this lounge. Graduate students tend to use this lounge for TA office hours or to work on their own work. So we took over the planning for the renovation for that. We designed the new look of the space, adapted it so it would be better utilized for group work and for work with TAs. We've also held qualifying exam prep sessions where we have senior graduate students come in and share their experiences to help prepare students for the qualifying exam as best they can. We also enjoy holding socials. Obviously, while in person it's a lot easier to do that with pizza and board games that we've done before. We've also held trivia nights, as we've referenced several times, which are very fun.
Emphasis on pizza. Nothing gets grad students out of their labs more than pizza.
We had
Pizza.
almost 50 people, I believe, at our social back in January. So
Wait, okay, let me interrupt you for 1 second. What is your opinion of the best pizza in Troy?
Well, I like
Okay.
Islands.
Yep. Okay. Waleed?
I mean, Big Apple. I'm not very big on pizza, but Big Apple's pizza is okay. There's also Amante's Pizza that's on 15th Street. That's pretty good as well. They have their days. Sometimes they're really good. Sometimes they're
Hit or miss, right? All right, keep going.
Yeah, so to Lauren's point about the social, we had different games as well. We had Jenga. Faculty members showed up as well. So there was just faculty members versus students doing Jenga. And we had those little tiles. People were painting stuff. And it was just like everybody has a good time in those socials. So this is pretty much what we're up to. The next thing on our plate is going to be our elections. Um we're going to be selecting a new graduate council. Uh, this current graduate council that includes me and Lauren, we've won uncontested for 2 years. I don't expect it to change, but
We'll see.
we're going to hold elections.
And our purpose is to not only interact, so we meet monthly with our graduate program director and the department head. So we address academic concerns or issues that individual students bring up, but we're also trying to increase the social experience of graduate students. It's really easy to get so focused on just being in your lab and doing your work all the time, and it is important to get a breakaway. It's been a great way for me to meet people. I'm only in a research group of 2, so it's me and one other graduate student. And so it's been nice to get to know people through these events as well. So
we
our
had
holistic.
we had other initiatives as well pre-COVID as well. For example, we worked with our department to fund graduate student lunches for one day of the month. Wednesday, just go out somewhere on campus uh, at the department's expense and talk about. The idea was that once you go to that lunch, you can't talk about your research, just talk about anything else. So
Great.
so there are other things as well that we work at, and most importantly, it's just uh, trying to make the life of graduate students better in the department. And I would have to say our department head and our graduate program director are very cooperative, and sometimes they give us ideas of, you know what, you can do that. And this lunch thing
Right.
actually came from our graduate program advisor. You know what, you can go on lunch, we'll pay you.
We're like, we like food. That's a great idea. But they're very engaged, and they're being active about what we're interested in as well, because it is a very different perspective from the administrative side and being a professor than it is to being a student. So it's a nice bridge between both.
Yeah. We have our website up as well. We're gonna start updating that. So we're going to celebrate the achievements of our fellow graduate students who I thought did not get that much recognition. Usually someone won an award and nobody knew about it. So we're gonna start to feature that on our website and do other stuff. And hopefully some of you will join us over the years and we'd continue this.
And the ECSE website is updated very frequently in general. So we have the Graduate Student Council page, but there's also posts about professors that win grants or, just developments in the department, as well as information that's specific to our department regarding our graduate programs.
Awesome. All right. Well, if we have no other questions from the group, I would like to thank you both. Let's maybe give it 1 minute. Any last questions from anybody? Feel free to turn off your or turn on your camera and join that way. Thank you very much. Awesome. Yes, this was great. I will include my email address here in the chat. So if anybody has further questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm happy to help you. Again, Waleed and Lauren, thank you so much. This has been fabulous. I hope everybody is staying safe and healthy. And we hope to see all of your applications very soon. Thanks a lot. Yes, great. Awesome. All right. Well, take care, everyone. Have a great day.
All right.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Thanks.